The air in Manhattan was electric with tension. Protesters lined the streets outside the New York Supreme Court building, holding signs both for and against Donald Trump. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Former President Trump sat confidently at the defense table, flanked by his legal team, while across the room, New York Attorney General Letitia James reviewed her notes with visible determination. The legal battle had been raging for months. James had brought a sweeping civil fraud case against Trump, accusing him of massively inflating the value of his assets. The media called it her career-defining moment, a bold move to hold the former president accountable. But behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to form. Trump's legal team had uncovered a trove of documents that, they claimed, exposed a coordinated political effort against him. Evidence began surfacing that suggested improper communication between James' office and partisan actors. The narrative was shifting. What had started as a prosecution now looked dangerously close to persecution. Outside the court, conservative voices grew louder. "Weaponized justice," they cried. And for the first time, even moderate commentators began to ask, was this case truly about the law, or politics? Trump, never one to shy away from the spotlight, seized the moment. "This is a witch hunt," he declared outside the courthouse, his voice booming over the press microphones. "And it's falling apart." The headlines the next morning said it all: Trump turns the tables, bombshell evidence rocks James' case. As the trial moved into its third week, Letitia James's case began to unravel under the glare of national scrutiny. Trump's legal team went on the offensive, unveiling internal emails obtained through discovery that hinted at political motivations behind the investigation. One email, dated just days before the lawsuit was filed, showed a senior aide in James' office referring to the case as a legacy move and hinting it could boost national visibility. The courtroom gasped when it was read aloud. The defense pounced. "This isn't just about overvaluing properties," Trump's lead attorney said, standing before the jury. "This is about using the justice system as a political weapon. And now, you've seen the proof." Outside the courthouse, public opinion was shifting. Polls showed growing skepticism toward James's case, even among independents. Some longtime supporters of the Attorney General began to fall silent. Her once confident demeanor in press conferences was replaced with curt statements and visible frustration. Meanwhile, Trump capitalized on the momentum. He launched a media blitz, appearing on friendly networks and flooding social media with declarations of victory. "They tried to silence me," he posted, "but now it's their credibility on trial." Cable news turned the case into a spectacle. Pundits debated endlessly, had James gone too far? Was this the beginning of her political downfall? And then came the most devastating moment yet, a surprise witness. One of James's former aides, subpoenaed by the defense, testified that the Attorney General had discussed the political upside of targeting Trump during private meetings. That moment broke the case wide open. The judge called an emergency recess. James looked shaken for the first time. The headlines were brutal: star witness turns, James under fire. Trump surging, James fading. Is the AG's career over? Inside the courthouse, silence gripped the room as Letitia James took the stand, an unthinkable move just weeks earlier. With mounting pressure and a collapsing case, her team had decided to take the gamble. It was a last-ditch effort to reclaim control of the narrative. But Trump's legal team was prepared. In cross-examination, they methodically dismantled her credibility. Calmly but ruthlessly, Trump's lead attorney questioned her about meetings, internal memos, and public comments she had made even before her investigation began. "Didn't you once say that your mission was to get Trump?" That was taken out of context, James responded, visibly tense. "And yet here we are, with no criminal charges and a political storm. Would you say your mission was a success? I was doing my job. Or pursuing your ambition?" The courtroom buzzed. Reporters scrambled to get quotes. Trump sat stone-faced, arms folded, watching the collapse he had long predicted unfold in real time. Outside, the mood had shifted dramatically. What once felt like a noble pursuit of accountability now seemed reckless, partisan at best, corrupt at worst. Editorial boards that had once championed James now called for introspection. Some even hinted that she should resign if the case officially collapsed. On social media, the hashtags told the story. #Trump vindicated, #Letitia exposed, #political prosecution. Meanwhile, Trump's approval ratings ticked upward. His supporters rallied behind him more fiercely than ever, framing the trial as further proof that he was the only one brave enough to fight the system. And then came the final blow. The judge issued a formal rebuke of the prosecution's conduct, stating there were serious procedural irregularities and reasonable concerns regarding selective enforcement. It wasn't an acquittal, but it was close. The media took it as a signal. Judge slams James's case, Trump declares victory. It's over for her. Letitia James left the courthouse that evening through a side exit, avoiding cameras. Trump, in contrast, stepped right into the spotlight, fist raised. They tried to destroy me. Instead, they destroyed themselves. The courtroom battle had ended, not with a dramatic verdict, but with a quiet retreat. Under mounting pressure and dwindling public support, Letitia James announced that her office would be reassessing the scope of the civil case. It was the bureaucratic way of saying what everyone already knew: she had lost. The damage to her reputation was severe. Political allies distanced themselves. Editorials called the case a miscalculation of historic proportions. One prominent Democrat lamented off the record, she handed Trump a victory gift wrapped in legal overreach. Whispers of an ethics review began to circulate in Albany. Republican lawmakers demanded a full investigation into how the case was launched. Meanwhile, rumors swirled that James might not seek re-election, her once promising career now tainted by the perception of partisanship and defeat. Trump, by contrast, was triumphant. He held a massive rally in Florida just days after the court's formal dismissal of key elements of the case. Tens of thousands packed into the venue, waving flags and chanting, "Letitia's gone, and for more years." From the stage, Trump spoke like a man reborn. "They said I was finished. They said I couldn't win. But we just crushed one of the most corrupt political witch hunts in history. And guess what? We're just getting started." His supporters erupted. Political analysts, once skeptical of his 2024 chances, now acknowledged a startling reality: the failed prosecution had supercharged his campaign. Donations surged. Momentum grew. The media couldn't look away. One headline captured it perfectly: Letitia James made him stronger. Trump's greatest political gift was his enemy's mistake. In the end, it wasn't just a courtroom victory. It was a political resurrection. Letitia James faded from the spotlight, her name now etched in the annals of high-profile miscalculations. And Donald Trump, defiant as ever, marched toward the next election with renewed fire. Whatever came next, one thing was certain: she tried to bury him, but instead, she made him unstoppable. The END, let me know if you want a video script adaptation, dramatic narration, or news-style article version. Months had passed since the dramatic courtroom collapse that ended Letitia James's crusade against Donald Trump, but the ripple effects were only beginning. In political circles across the country, the message was loud and clear: weaponized lawfare had backfired. The New York Attorney General's office, once seen as a powerful check on political corruption, now found itself under investigation. Whistleblowers came forward, alleging internal pressure to fast-track the Trump case for media attention. Legislative oversight hearings followed, exposing deep flaws in how the case had been built, and why it was launched in the first place. Letitia James, while avoiding formal censure, announced she would not run for re-election. "It's time for me to step back and reflect," she said in a brief press conference, avoiding any mention of Trump by name. She left office quietly, without fanfare. Meanwhile, the legal and political establishment braced for a reckoning. Other prosecutors with cases pending against Trump began to tread more carefully. Some dropped charges altogether, unwilling to repeat James's public failure. Others restructured their legal strategies, hoping to avoid the perception of political bias. But the man at the center of it all? He surged forward. Trump's campaign rode the wave of victory all the way into the Republican National Convention, where he accepted the nomination with thunderous applause and record-breaking enthusiasm. "They thought they could stop us with lies and lawsuits," he roared from the stage. "But we crushed them with truth and strength. America saw what they tried to do, and America said no more." Poll numbers soared. Even some independents who had been lukewarm toward Trump now viewed him as a symbol of resilience against institutional overreach. Across the country, Trump's victory over James became a rallying cry. They came for him, and he beat them all. The story echoed not just as a political saga, but as a cautionary tale, one that would reshape the boundaries between law and politics for years to come. And somewhere in upstate New York, far from the spotlight, Letitia James watched the Trump rally on TV in silence. Once the hunter, now the symbol of a failed crusade. History, as always, would choose its own narrator. In the months after the trial's collapse and Letitia James's political retreat, battle lines shifted from the courtroom to the court of public opinion. Books were written. Documentaries announced. Both sides raced to control the legacy of the battle that had gripped the nation. For the left, James was quietly repackaged as a cautionary figure, not a villain, but someone who had overreached in pursuit of justice. Progressive publications framed her downfall as the result of systemic flaws, not personal ambition. But in the populist right, her image was etched in stone. Letitia James became the face of political lawfare gone wrong. At Trump rallies, cardboard cutouts of James with red X's over her face became common. Conservative influencers coined a new term, getting Jamesed, used to describe when political opponents push too far and implode. Meanwhile, Trump's influence only grew. International media outlets covered his legal victory like a political revolution. Right-leaning governments abroad cited his ordeal as proof that the West was slipping into a crisis of justice. A newly published bestseller titled Persecuted, The Trump Trials and the New American Tyranny, soared to the top of global charts. And yet, the story didn't end with one side silenced. Letitia James, despite her fall, was not finished. Months after stepping away from public office, she began appearing at academic panels and interviews, reframing the case as a necessary fight, even if it failed. She warned that the real danger was not legal overreach, but unchecked populism. It sparked fierce debate. Was she defending democracy, or rewriting failure? Trump, never missing an opportunity, mocked her resurgence. She had her moment, he said at a town hall. And the American people handed her a verdict. She lost. It's over. Move on. But deep down, he knew something important. The war wasn't just legal or political anymore. It was cultural. Emotional. Eternal. The trial had ended. The judge had spoken. But the battle for the narrative, for the truth, was still burning. And in that fire, both names would live on. Trump. James. Two forces, two legacies, forever linked by a trial that changed the American story. A year had passed since the trial that shook the legal and political foundations of New York, and perhaps, the nation. Donald Trump, now the official GOP nominee, was storming across the country on a "Justice Restored" tour, using the Letitia James saga as his battle cry. But while he dominated the national stage, something unexpected was happening in the shadows. Letitia James was quietly rebuilding. Away from cameras, she had joined a legal think tank focused on restoring trust in institutions, and had begun assembling a new coalition, not of politicians, but of public interest lawyers, disillusioned prosecutors, and even former Trump critics who had grown weary of the chaos. She kept her profile low but her presence steady. In an exclusive interview with The New Yorker, she made her first bold statement since stepping down: "I failed in court. But I exposed a reality no one can unsee. Trump manipulated the system as he always has. This time, he walked. But this story isn't over. That line lit up cable news. Suddenly, opinion shifted again. Was this regret, or a warning? Trump, of course, fired back immediately. Letitia James wants a sequel. Well, guess what? We already know how it ends. With me on top. Again. Yet behind his bravado, cracks were forming. More lawsuits loomed, this time in states where prosecutors were being much more cautious, learning from James's missteps. And then, the twist no one expected, a major whistleblower from inside the real estate world, previously silent, came forward with new documents, claiming that Trump's post-trial declarations had been less than truthful. Suddenly, headlines shifted, new evidence raises questions after Trump legal win. Letitia James wasn't wrong, just early. James stayed quiet. But her former team began showing up again, on podcasts, on panels, and in private briefings with congressional staff. A rematch wasn't just possible. It was becoming likely. The American public now stood on the edge of a deeper realization, maybe justice wasn't a straight line. Maybe it twisted, paused, and returned when no one was looking. And somewhere deep in the quiet offices of Manhattan, Letitia James stared at a new case folder, no press, no cameras, no grand speeches. Just strategy. Patience. Precision. Because maybe the story wasn't, Trump crushed James. Maybe it was, Trump won the round. But the fight isn't over. Summer 2026. The political temperature in America had reached boiling point. Donald Trump, fresh off a narrow but powerful election victory, returned to the White House with an iron grip on his base and a promise to dismantle the deep state once and for all. His first 100 days were a whirlwind of executive orders, media showdowns, and legal counteroffensives against the very institutions that once tried to bring him down. And in the background, the name Letitia James resurfaced. But this time, she wasn't coming back as a prosecutor. She was coming back as a candidate. Standing in front of the Brooklyn courthouse where her political ascent first began, James announced her candidacy for governor of New York. They tried to bury me in headlines. But I never stopped fighting for the truth. And now, I'm not just fighting back, I'm running to lead. The political world lit up. Analysts were stunned. She had vanished quietly after her legal defeat, expected to fade into academia or legal consulting. But behind the scenes, she had been rebuilding relationships, gathering endorsements, and watching Trumpism dominate the headlines. Now, she was ready to become its regional counterbalance. The strategy was clear: while Trump ruled from D.C., James would rise from New York as the figure who could claim moral clarity, legal expertise, and a hard-earned humility. This wasn't the Letitia James of bombast and soundbites. This was a sharpened, battle-tested version. But Trump didn't stay silent for long. Letitia James is running. Again. She failed in court, failed as AG, and now she wants to fail even bigger. I say bring it on. The rematch was no longer just legal, it was political, personal, and national in its symbolism. The media framed it as the clash of two titans, one ruling from the Capitol, the other rising from the ashes of defeat. And then came the leak. A cache of documents, emails, internal memos, and even recorded phone calls, surfaced anonymously. They detailed inconsistencies in Trump's legal dealings post-trial. Some seemed to confirm what James had tried to prove years before: manipulation of asset values, concealed partnerships, and influence over friendly prosecutors. Suddenly, the narrative flipped again. James called for an independent inquiry. Congress, divided but rattled, began hearings. Whispers of "what if she was right all along" flooded media outlets. And behind closed doors, Trump's new legal team scrambled to control the damage. Because the truth was clear, Letitia James hadn't disappeared. She had waited. Watched. And now, she was striking back, smarter, stronger, and more dangerous than ever. Fall 2026. The midterms were over. And in one of the most shocking political upsets in recent memory, Letitia James had done the impossible. She was now governor of New York. Her victory wasn't just a comeback, it was a revolution. After being humiliated in the courts and politically declared finished, James had clawed her way back, transforming herself from the face of a failed prosecution to a symbol of tenacity, redemption, and institutional resistance. And now she had a platform, and a state, of her own. At her inauguration, James didn't mention Trump by name. She didn't have to. New York will not be ruled by fear, nor bent by threats. We are a firewall, a standard, and a warning. No one is above accountability. Not even the most powerful. Everyone knew exactly who she meant. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Donald Trump seethed. His allies dismissed James's victory as a blue state fluke, but inside the West Wing, her rise was seen as a threat, not just politically, but legally. The newly unearthed financial documents were now under investigation by independent prosecutors in multiple states. And New York, under Governor James, wasn't going to play nice. Trump's aides urged restraint. But restraint wasn't in his DNA. He went on the offensive. Governor Letitia James is a disgrace. She failed before, she'll fail again. We're watching her every move. She better watch hers. But James was ready. She began a series of state-level reforms aimed at protecting New York's judiciary from federal overreach. She built legal firewalls, formed interstate coalitions, and publicly supported whistleblowers from within federal agencies. Her moves were strategic, relentless, and methodical. Behind closed doors, she had another plan brewing, a special state commission to reopen the investigation Trump once dodged, only this time, it would involve new witnesses, protected by her office. For the first time since returning to power, Trump wasn't controlling the narrative. Cable news ran split screens, Trump in Washington versus James in Albany. President versus governor. The rematch, now fully underway. And then came the moment that shook the country. James's new commission released a preliminary report. It didn't accuse Trump directly, but it named individuals in his inner circle. It referenced new offshore accounts, questionable filings, and back-channel negotiations with foreign investors during his previous trial. Subpoenas followed. And one name kept coming up, Donald J. Trump. The White House responded with fury. Trump threatened federal lawsuits, hinted at emergency powers, and accused James of treason. But for once, the spotlight didn't favor him. Because now the story had flipped completely. This wasn't the AG chasing the former president. This was a governor standing toe-to-toe with the most powerful man in the world. And this time, she wasn't alone. The nation stood at a crossroads. Governor Letitia James's relentless pursuit had shattered decades-old norms. Her state's commission continued to peel back layers of secrecy around Donald Trump's financial empire, unearthing a web of deception that stretched far beyond anything previously revealed. Pressure mounted from all sides. The media frenzy was relentless, with nightly coverage framing the battle as nothing less than a fight for the soul of America. Trump fought back with everything he had, incendiary speeches, legal counterattacks, and a loyal base willing to defend him at all costs. Yet cracks began to show within his circle. Key allies quietly distanced themselves. Donors hesitated. Polls showed declining approval, even among Republicans. Inside the White House, whispers grew louder. Several top aides, fearing a constitutional crisis, urged Trump to negotiate. But he refused, doubling down on his rhetoric. Then, in a stunning move, the U.S. Department of Justice announced it was coordinating with New York's investigations, marking an unprecedented joint federal-state effort. The crescendo came on a cold winter night in early 2027. In a nationally televised address, Letitia James laid out the findings of the investigation in stark terms. This is not about politics. This is about truth, justice, and the rule of law. The evidence shows a systematic pattern of fraud and obstruction. No one, not even a former president, is above the law. The country held its breath. Days later, a grand jury in New York indicted Donald Trump on multiple counts of financial fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The political earthquake was felt nationwide. Trump's supporters claimed persecution. Protesters clashed in the streets. But the wheels of justice kept turning. In court, the drama unfolded with breathtaking intensity. Every hearing was a media event, every witness scrutinized. Yet the weight of evidence was undeniable. Months later, the verdict came. Guilty on most charges. Donald Trump's legal empire, once untouchable, lay in ruins. Letitia James, once dismissed as a political pariah, now stood vindicated. Her name became synonymous with courage and perseverance. The country was deeply divided, but one truth was clear: the battle was brutal. The stakes were historic. And in the end, justice had prevailed.